Our next MyTakes speaker will be Charles Ifedi, Chief Executive Officer of Verve International. Charles hails from Nigeria. He is part of the Interswitch group. And prior to his current position, he was Director of Payment Solutions and Business Expansion at Interswitch. Within the Interswitch group, Charles currently oversees their consumer business across Africa, which includes the Quick Teller brand. In terms of Verve itself, we're quite excited to have them here. Verve is an example of a homegrown business within Africa, which speaks to today's theme. They're the first domestic card scheme in Nigeria, and currently the card is issued in 6 African countries by over 40 banks and is accepted in 21 African countries. Charles is here today to share his wonderful story, and we're pleased that he'll be able to talk to us about the innovator within him. So thank you, Charles.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Okay, my name is Charles Ifedi. I'm from Nigeria. I used to be from Nigeria, and right now I'm from Africa. It's difficult to attempt to grow a business outside of Nigeria, and you go into each country and introduce yourself as Nigerian. So I'm not... Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about innovation and the innovator within. I'm going to show... So you can take 2 things out of the slides I'm going to show. You can either read the text or you can look at the pictures at the back. Okay. Every picture at the back has a meaning. It's somewhere in Lagos. So if you have a Nigerian near you, just ask, where do you think that is? Just in case I'm not making a lot of sense, you could just ask, where is that? And is there actually electricity going through those wires? Okay. So innovation and entrepreneurship are topics that people are always talking about. You talk about it every single time. And you read about it, you learn about it in business schools, but there's really nothing you can actually do but beyond actually doing something. I'm going to talk a little bit about my own story, about the story of Interswitch and how we've gotten to where we are, the story of Verve and how we've gotten to where we are. And of course, I'll start by ending with where Professor Clayton started yesterday. He spoke about disruptive innovation. And everyone in this room is always talking about disruptive innovation. In the panel that I was a member of a few minutes ago, someone was saying that disrupt and innovation are one and the same thing. And I said, no, they're not one and the same thing. If we were listening yesterday to the professor, he said there were 3 types of innovation. He called one disruptive, he called one sustain. You see, were you listening? He called one sustenance and he called one efficiency. And I look at the innovation from just two aspects. I see one as disruptive and I see one as incremental. And that's really what I look at. And both of them are important. So I'm not going to talk about the theory. I'm going to talk about what I actually see in real life. So you can look at the efficiency one and the sustenance one as incremental and the disruptive one as the real big thing. Now, 1 or 2 more things I'm going to say before I go straight to my story is you need both of them, both the disruptive one and the incremental one, to get whatever result you want to get. And if your result is social change, if your result is to make money, you need both of them. Now, note I use the word expected results, all right? Expected results, not your passion, not your motivation. What the expected result is. Because if your passion and motivation is money, I think you're going to fail. Okay? So your passion and motivation has to be the customer that you're pursuing and what problem you are solving for that customer. I'm sure you've heard that all the time. So I'll go from there and I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So this is another picture of somewhere in Lagos. So guess where that is? Okay, so I was born a few years ago, and okay. No, when I finish talking about my story, some people will be able to figure out when I was born, but I wouldn't tell you if you ask me. So I was born a few years ago, and when I was born, I would say my motivations were very, very simple and straightforward, right? I would eat, I'll go to school if I'm forced to go to school, and I'll do the things I like. So as I was growing up, I learned to play chess when I was 7, and I really loved playing chess. And I played chess in secondary school, what you call junior high here. And I became very good, and I used to play for my state government, in fact, so for junior high and high school competitions. So my motivation at that time was not to go to school, but to be a good chess player. Okay, with that, I got access to the computer lab in the school. Yes, we had computers. Computer lab in the school, and I started learning to play chess against the computer because most of the people were not good enough, right? So after learning to play chess on a computer and playing against the computer, I finally beat the computer for the first time after about 3 years of trying. And it took me about 95 moves and 3 hours plus of playing. Now, what fascinated me about that was not that I beat the computer, was actually how did someone write a program that made this computer so difficult to beat? So my next motivation now became, how do I learn how to program? So my motivation shifted from there, and I became a programmer. And I learned to program, and I think I became very good at it, and said this was the best job ever. So I was working while I was in university. So I was working with a company that, for them, it was cheap labor. For me, it was experience. And so I went on to do that. And 1 year after graduation, I got my first job as an experienced developer because I had a lot of experience at that point in time. And right 1 year into that job, I said, no, I don't think this is what I want to do. Don't get me wrong. I felt that programming was literally the best job anyone could ever do because you're creating stuff every day and it's extremely exciting. And the reason why my motivation changed suddenly was I read somewhere, somebody told me, I can't really remember whether I broke a fortune cookie, but I read somewhere. It said the person that knows how will always have a job, but the person that knows why would always be his boss. So I decided that so I said I could know all the how I wanted to know, but I wanted to be the boss. So I decided to change my career and say I wanted to go into business to actually understand why we were doing the things we were doing, because I would get a brief to do something and I would do it and really did not understand why I was doing this. So my decision to move basically led me to consulting, and so I worked from PwC to Anderson Consulting to Accenture. So I was a consultant, and it was when I was in Accenture that I got the opportunity for Interswitch. Well, it didn't have a name at the time, for a switch in Nigeria that needed consulting services, and basically they needed a business plan. They needed to raise money for the business, and so this was a project that I led. So I led this thing to create the business plan for the company. So I wrote the business plan. After writing the business plan, we had 89 banks in Nigeria at the time, so I had to take the business plan to all of these banks to raise money. And after about 9 months of doing this, we were able to raise about $2 million for the business. So that was how Interswitch started. So after the investors brought in this money, they basically created a management team of 3 of us. And I guess they said, since you wrote the business plan and you collected our money, come and become one of the management team. So that's how I joined the company. So Interswitch started in 2002 December and did various things. When we started, first of all, when I went to tell my dad that, listen, I want to go into this business, that I wrote the business plan for, my dad felt there was something wrong with me. And I told him that, listen, that the reason why I want to do this is because that I think that we have significant challenges in Nigeria. Various banks had deployed ATMs and nobody was making money. Various banks had issued cards, and your cards could only work at the ATM of your own bank. So we wanted to build an infrastructure that would interconnect all of these people. And since there were 89 banks, that was really going to be a lot of work, and it could take a while for us to complete that. And so we started. In 18 months, out of 89 banks, we were only able to get about 9 banks. So we were like, man, this is a very difficult time. So we got 9 banks, we interconnected these 9 banks, and they started transacting amongst themselves. Now, you would have said, 89, we still had a long way to go. But something very interesting happened. The central bank in Nigeria said that banks should increase their shareholder capital from $50 million to about $250 million in 2005. So what that meant is that in the middle of 2005, the remaining 80 banks were no longer interested. Their entire focus was now on how do I raise enough shareholders' capital to actually grow my business. And at that point in time, we had to change our focus once again. Our focus has to shift from banks who were initially our primary customers. Our focus now had to shift to who else could benefit from this infrastructure that we were putting in place. And when we and the team sat down to discuss, we realized we had just 2 options. We could fold our arms and die, or we could actually change our focus. And so what we decided to do was to focus our energies now on corporates, on governments, on billers, and on the consumer, not the banks anymore. And so we spent the next 18 months focusing on that, on those people. So between that time and 2006, when the deadline for the banks to consolidate, we had really gotten a lot of customers. So we had the Inland Revenue Service leveraging our infrastructure, the main utility companies for water and electricity leveraging our infrastructure, and so many other people. But what that meant is that when the consolidation finished, we were now very, very relevant. Right? We were relevant to the now 25 banks that were left, because you had built an infrastructure that had a connection to all the billers, more or less, that were in the country. Were connected to the government and could provide so many services in the country. So we're very, very fortunate that once 2006 arrived, when the consolidation was completed, we had all the banks now connected to us because we had something to offer. So I took off time at that point, and I went to do my MBA in the UK. Yes, I went to the UK, not Harvard. And when I got back, I was now responsible for international expansion of the business, to basically take what we had done in Nigeria and try and replicate it across Africa. That's why I said I became African and no longer Nigerian, which was a very, very, very difficult thing. Because in the panel I spoke at today, I said one of the big things we need to do as Africans is to unite. Because we do not trust ourselves, we do not support ourselves. The same thing that I would take from Nigeria to the next country, if it came from China, not India, from China, the US. No, we like Indians. If it came from China, the US, or the UK, it would be more accepted than what we as Africans put together. So, but we started that, and we got some degree of success because we had customers in 8 African countries. Then in 2009, another challenge, the central bank decided that all the magnetic stripes in Nigeria should stop working and we should all move to EMV, chip and pin, basically the same thing that the US is. I think they targeted October last year. Did you achieve the target? Okay. So, but the central bank in Nigeria gave a deadline. I know when the central bank in Nigeria gives a deadline, they give a deadline. So they basically said by April 2009, all cards, any card you issue must be EMV. By September 2009, switch off all magnetic stripe cards. So when that happened, my colleague said, Charles, this is a new challenge, go and run Verve. And that was how I started running Verve card scheme. So we created the card scheme, started in April 2009, issued the first card, issued the second card, and have been issuing cards ever since. So today, we've been able to take Verve from a single card issued only in Nigeria to a card issued in the countries that in 6 African countries as we speak. But this is still very, very new. There's still an opportunity for Verve or any other African brand to even grow beyond the shores of Nigeria. Now, I'd like to just take you through a summary of all the things I've said. I've told a story, right? What does that story mean to you? So I'm going to give you 5 things that I think I learned from my own story that if you were busy looking at the pictures, you would not have heard, that I think you would take. The first thing is your focus and motivation needs to be very, very clear. If it's not clear to anybody, it should be clear. It should be clear to you. And if that your focus on motivation is money, like I said, you're going to fail, right? So your focus on motivation needs to be very, very clear because it can change. The examples I gave is when, for example, at the beginning of Interswitch, our focus was to something good can come out of Nigeria. Can we not create a payment infrastructure that is homegrown and good? And so that was our focus on motivation. When I was asked to run Verve, my focus on motivation changed also. My focus now became, how do you create a Pan-African card scheme that will be accepted across Africa? And once again, it was, how can we prove that something good can come out of Nigeria? Another thing that may also change, another example of what changed was once we had to change from our focus being on banks, which was our initial primary customers, and we had to shift our focus to corporates, businesses, and consumers. That changed our focus on motivation as well. So what I'm basically saying here is be flexible, right? Be flexible, be willing to change, but make sure that your focus on motivation is not just about the money. Because the money could come, if your focus is money, when the money comes, I think you're going to lose focus and basically your business will fail. Okay, the second take is that there will be ups and downs, right? There's no better down than I've ever seen by 80 banks telling you I'm no longer interested in your product, and that was the reason why you were set up. Okay, so like I said, be flexible, be willing to adapt, be able to adapt, and you may have to change. The example of the change that I had to make was when I was a core programmer, I had at some point in time to change that. Because of where I wanted to go, I should be willing to change. Don't say things like, this is who I am, this is how I am, and as such, I'm not going to change. Love what you do, right? Love what you do. Make sure that no matter what kind of challenge you're going through, you should be able to wake up. So it's almost as if when those challenges came, we actually enjoy some of those challenges. Maybe not, you can say that after, but when you're in the neck of the challenge, be willing to wake up and say, listen, I embrace this challenge, and this is something that I am willing and definitely able to overcome. Build a great team, and this you hear it all the time, but I would like to say it one more time. Build a great team or play your role in a great team. And the reason why I put this one there is a lot of people focus on being number one, right? A lot of people saying, I want to be an entrepreneur so I can go on my own. If you are number one, I would say hire people smarter than you. Yeah, and hire people that don't have the same blind spots that you have. And when I say blind spots, I'll give the example of the three of us that basically started Interswitch. The one guy, he could see, he could really create castles in the sky, right? But how to bring those castles down but he was very, very visionary. The second guy could understand those things and say, okay, what does it mean in real life? And me, I was left to execute, right? You said this is what it was. Let's see. So, he always cracks this joke that when you come and paint the big picture for Charles doesn't smile. Because he's first of all focusing on what could go wrong. So, basic understanding from that is make sure you do not, a lot of people tend to hire people like them. A lot of people tend to partner with people like them. No. Partner with people that have strengths that you do not have. I think that's easily said, but people like to partner with people that are like them, and a lot of times that doesn't work. The second thing still on this one is you really don't have to be number one, right? Because there was this book I read a while ago about leader without a title. You really don't have to be number one. If you're driving your passion, you're driving your vision, at the point in time, that may be just where you need to be. You could be a great co-founder, you could be a great number two, a great number three, or even a great number one, but just be great at that thing that you're doing. And my last take is it's not all about big disruptive innovations, because that is what we are always thinking about. I also say this, that between two big, great disruptive innovations, there need to be small, incremental ones, right? So you have Apple. Apple made the Mac and Macintosh at the time, right? Made the Mac. And they had to keep on making incremental things. And with time, they made the iPod. Then they made incremental ones. Then they made the iPhone and iPad. I can't remember which one came first. But there always needed to be incremental innovation. Some people just sit down and say, no, I must come up with something that must disrupt and change the world. If that is what your entire focus is, you are going to what? You are going to fail. So even as a business, you create something first, and somebody comes and copies you, and you're like, wow. I mean, if somebody comes and copies you, find the next thing that you're supposed to do. In the session I also spoke about the red and the blue ocean. So go and read that book, The Blue Ocean Strategy, and to actually tell you how to always focus on those two parts of the business, to compete in the red ocean, but always be looking for the blue ocean to be able to get out of that. And something I also believe, if you're not very busy thinking and doing, if you're just busy walking around, dreaming, if you're not doing anything, you will not see the small innovations, you will not see the big innovations. So start doing something. Always start doing something so that you will move forward. So my final slide. No, so this is basically talking about be doing something, right? Yeah, be doing something and continue to believe that you're going to get something out of it. So whoever you are, wherever you are an innovator, right? Whether you're doing big things, whether you're doing small things, you're an innovator. Because you need all those kinds of people. You need the people that are going to be looking at the big things. You need the people that are going to be looking at the small things. You need the people that are executing. And you need the small things in between. And that's my take. Thank you very much. So I have time for 2 questions. If you can come to and I already have. Is it one of the pictures you want to see again? Okay. Go first.
Hi, Charles. Good afternoon. Neka from Dahlberg. Good to see you. One of the things I always told people who came to Nigeria and couldn't use their cards was it's not because of Nigeria, it's because some of the international card players didn't want to enter the market. So you all have now proven that there's a massive market in Nigeria. So you have Visa, MasterCard finally in the Nigerian market who weren't there 10, 15 years ago. But at the same time, you have hopefully some new innovations actually coming out without cards. So what's next for you, as you were saying? What's the next innovation?
Okay. So yes, when we started the company in 2002, we actually wanted just to be an infrastructure, and we wanted international card schemes to come in. But at the time, they said Nigeria was a very, very risky market, and they refused. So that was why we decided to go ahead with what we did. But by 2006, 2007, we had shown some degree of success. So that's why everyone is in Nigeria now. On the next big thing, I mean, there is, like I said, is a friend of mine said it once. I mean, and I always pretend that I'm the person that said it. Is you keep on doing small things, right? Until you're able to find that next big thing you're going to do. So right now, I mean, there are cards in Nigeria and all those kinds of things, and I see those things as the red ocean right now. So what we are trying to do now are to do transactions without a card. So our focus is to say, yes, we are playing in that segment of cards everywhere, but how can we get to an ATM and withdraw cash from an ATM without a card? How can we do it directly from a bank account? So those are the kind of things that we're thinking about right now, and we're going to certainly do in 2016. So there are so many of those kinds of things, some of which I cannot say openly, but there are so many of those kind of things that we're thinking about. So thanks for the question.
Hi, Charles. Thank you for being here. I'm also very young, like you, born a few years ago. I'm from Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, and I was wondering, out of all your career, you've accomplished many things, you're very successful man in many different aspects and the things that you've done. What has been your one biggest failure, and what pinpoint did you learn from that thing?
No, unfortunately, I can't actually tell you my biggest failure. I can't. It's one of those things that you say and people will wonder why they even believe in you and why they listen to you. So. Well, I'll tell you one of the second ones. Okay. So when the banks in 2004, 2005 said they were no longer going to be interested in this until they were able to raise their capital, the first thing we did was to start designing and creating new products that we'll take to the market, and we literally just started building. We just started building, and it wasn't just accepted in the market. So for it to get what we know how to do was actually go and sit down with these big customers, these potential big customers, and actually listen to them for the first time. What are the problems that you have, and what are the challenges you need to get fixed? And that's what. So until we listened to them, and it was very, very clear that we were going to come up with a solution that meets their requirements. That was when we even started making a breakthrough. So the answer I'm going to give you for that one is, if you're not listening to your customers and you're just literally doing what you think you know how to do, you could create a beautiful product that is just going to sit on the shelf, or worse still, in the dustbin.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.